The ultimatum arrived on a Tuesday. No warning. No diplomatic preamble. Just a signal that burned through every frequency on Earth simultaneously, radio, satellite emergency broadcast, and resolved into a single voice speaking flawless English with the patience of something that had never once been told no. People of Earth, the Kreth Dominion has observed your world for 11 of your years. You are primitive. You are disorganized. You are, by every measurable standard, outmatched. You will submit 1,000 units of refined iridium, 300 specimens of your most advanced military technology, and formal acknowledgement of Dominion authority within 30 of your days. Noncompliance will be interpreted as declaration of war. Then silence. The UN Security Council convened within the hour. The shouting lasted 6 of the 30 days on its own. On day 8, they chose their envoy. Not a general, not a head of state, not a weapons negotiator or a theoretical physicist or anyone the Kreth Dominion might have expected Earth to send. They chose Ambassador Yusuf Al-Rashid, 61 years old, former history professor, 30 years in diplomatic service across 4 continents, known for 2 things: an almost supernatural ability to read a room and an obsession with cooking that his colleagues found endearing and his enemies found baffling. He accepted the appointment on the condition that he be allowed to handle the response in his own way. The Secretary General had looked at him for a long time. Yusuf, they want iridium and weapons. I know what they want, he said. So, what are you going to send them? He had already written it out by hand on a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the table. The Secretary General read it. Then read it again. This is a recipe. Yes, for chili. The best chili ever documented on this planet, Yusuf said pleasantly. I've been perfecting it for 19 years. The Secretary General stared at him. They will destroy us. Yusuf picked up his coat. Let's find out. The transmission reached the Kreth Dominion flagship in 4 hours. Supreme Warlord Varek of the Iron Fang received it personally. He had conquered 11 worlds. He had accepted tribute in the form of gold, crystal, living armies, entire planetary reserves of fuel. He had received pleas, surrenders, declarations of loyalty written in the blood of defeated kings. He had never received a recipe. His second-in-command, Commander Shet, read it twice on the datapad before speaking. It appears to be instructions for preparing food. I can see that, Varek said quietly. Quiet was dangerous from Varek. His officers knew this. The bridge went very still. They list ingredients. Shet scrolled carefully. Beef, which appears to be the muscle tissue of a large domesticated earth animal. Dried peppers, several varieties, including one they call Carolina Reaper, annotated here as he paused, as the hottest biological compound naturally produced on their planet. Another pause. They have included a warning. A warning. It says, Shet cleared his throat, not recommended for first-timers without supervision. This will hurt. That's the point. The bridge remained silent. Then something happened that Varek's officers had witnessed perhaps 3 times in a decade of service. Varek smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of something ancient and territorial that has just spotted a challenger approaching without armor. They mock us, said Shet. No, Varek said slowly, still staring at the datapad. They don't. He stood. A species that mocks does it with silence or with weapons. This is something else. He read the recipe again from the top. They send us the finest thing they possess. He handed the pad back to Shet. Make it exactly as written. Every ingredient sourced or synthesized precisely. He turned toward the viewport. I want to understand what kind of creature offers pain as a gift. Shet stared at him. You intend to eat it? Every last bite, Varek said. Sir, the Carolina Reaper compound alone could. Make it, Shet. Shet made it. It took the Dominion's culinary synthesizers 6 hours to locate, replicate, and assemble every ingredient on the list. Yusuf had been thorough. Annoyingly, suspiciously, almost criminally thorough. The recipe ran to 2 full pages. It specified the cut of beef, chuck roast, not brisket, not ground, do not substitute. It specified the peppers, 7 varieties, 4 of them dried and toasted individually before grinding. It specified dark chocolate, 70% cacao minimum, or don't bother. It specified cook time, low heat, 4 hours minimum, 6 preferred. Patience is the ingredient most cooks skip. Don't. Commander Shet had spent 40 minutes just locating a definition for rendered beef fat. The synthesis unit produced the final result at the 19th hour. The smell hit the bridge before the container was even opened. It stopped 3 officers mid-sentence. It was not a smell the Kreth vocabulary had adequate language for. It was deep and dark and layered, something burning underneath, something rich underneath, something that made the sinus passages simultaneously recoil and lean forward wanting more. The chocolate threaded through the meat smoke. The pepper heat arrived 3 seconds after the first breath, a slow-rising warmth that had no right being that complex. Shet stared at the bowl in front of Varek. "Sir, our medical officer advises, leave. The capsaicin concentration in this single portion is enough to cause..." "Shet, sir, leave." The bridge cleared in 11 seconds. Varek sat alone with the bowl. He studied it the way he studied enemy formations, looking for weaknesses, reading the terrain. Steam rose in slow curls. The surface was dark and impossibly rich, flecked with color, smelling of something that had been built rather than simply cooked. Layer over layer over layer, like a weapon assembled by someone who genuinely loved what they were making. He picked up the spoon. He took the first bite. For 4 seconds, nothing happened. Then the heat arrived. Varek set the spoon down very carefully. His hands were completely steady. His expression didn't change. But behind his eyes, something was happening that hadn't happened since his first battle 30 years ago. He was genuinely, profoundly, involuntarily present, not thinking about the fleet, not calculating tribute margins, not planning the next campaign. Every cell of his ancient, battle-hardened body was entirely focused on the single most aggressively complex sensation it had ever processed. He picked the spoon back up and took a second bite. He finished the entire bowl. It took 22 minutes. He did not rush. He ate the way the recipe had been written, with patience, with attention, pausing between bites the way you pause between movements of something you don't want to end. When the bowl was empty, he sat for a long time looking at it. His mouth was on fire. His eyes had watered twice, not enough for anyone to call it crying, but enough that he had noticed it himself and found the experience more interesting than embarrassing. His chest carried a warmth that was entirely separate from the capsaicin, something slower and deeper, the warmth of something that had taken genuine effort to create. He called Shet back in. "Pull every file we have on Earth," he said. "Not the military assessments, not the resource surveys, the cultural archives, food history, agricultural development, culinary evolution, everything." Shet stared at the empty bowl. "You finished it. Every file, Shet. Tonight." "Sir, our analysts classified Earth cuisine as primitive, subsistence level, early stage agricultural. Your analysts," Varek said carefully, "have never eaten anything that required 19 years of refinement to perfect." He stood. "Do you know how many worlds we have conquered?" 11, sir." "Do you know how many of them sent us something they had spent 19 years building?" Shet said nothing. "None," Varek said. "They sent gold. They sent weapons. They sent things they could afford to lose." He picked up the empty bowl and looked at it with an expression Shet had genuinely never seen on his commander's face. "This man sent us something he loves, something that took 2 decades of his one short human lifetime." He set the bowl down. "That is not mockery. That is not weakness." A long pause. "That is the most aggressive negotiating move I have encountered in 30 years of warfare." Shet opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. What does he want in return? Varek almost smiled. "That," he said, "is exactly the right question." He pulled up the communication terminal and began composing a response to Earth himself. No aid, no translator, no committee, just Varek and a blank screen and the memory of dark chocolate threading through pepper smoke. He typed 4 words. "Send the envoy. Now." Ambassador Yusuf Al-Rashid boarded the Kreth shuttle carrying one diplomatic case and a cooler bag. The cooler bag concerned his security detail considerably. "Sir," said Agent Darko, eyeing it with professional suspicion, "what's in there?" "Cornbread," Yusuf said pleasantly, "and a thermos of coffee. You don't go to a first meeting empty-handed. That's just manners. You're boarding a warship. All the more reason." The shuttle docked with the flagship Iron Dominion 40 minutes later. Yusuf stepped into the receiving bay and found 12 Kreth soldiers in full battle armor forming two lines, creating a corridor of deliberate intimidation. 8 feet tall, exoskeleton scarred from 100 campaigns, weapons visible and charged. Yusuf walked between them looking genuinely interested rather than afraid. He was shown to a meeting chamber. Obsidian black walls. A table designed to make visitors feel small. Lighting calibrated for psychological pressure, too bright in the center, too dark at the edges. Yusuf had been in rooms like this on 4 continents. He set the cooler bag on the table, unzipped it, and was arranging the cornbread on its cloth wrapping when Varek entered. The warlord was enormous, 2.5 meters, built from a lifetime of warfare. Wearing no ceremonial armor, just simple command uniform, which Yusuf recognized immediately as a calculated choice. No performance, no theater. This was a creature comfortable enough in its own authority to need neither costume nor prop. They studied each other across the table. "You're smaller than I expected," Varek said. "You're exactly what I expected," Yusuf replied. Something shifted in Varek's expression. Not offense. Closer to interest. He looked at the cornbread. "More food." "Cornbread. It pairs with the chili. You ate it without the cornbread, which technically means you had an incomplete experience." Yusuf slid a piece across the table. "Also coffee. Black. I didn't know how you take it, so I brought it straight and brought options." Varek looked at the cornbread for a long moment. Then he sat down. He picked it up, took a bite, chewed slowly. His expression did something complicated and private that he didn't fully manage to conceal. "Why," he said finally, "did you send a recipe?" Yusuf poured 2 cups of coffee. "Because you asked us what we valued most." He slid 1 cup across, and I answered honestly. Varek stared at him. "We asked for iridium and weapons." "No," Yusuf said calmly. "You asked for tribute. Tribute means the finest thing a people can offer." He wrapped both hands around his cup. "Warlord, we have iridium. We have weapons. 11 conquered worlds probably had those things too." A pause. "But I guarantee not one of them ever made you feel what you felt last night eating that bowl." The chamber was very quiet. Varek looked down at his coffee. "What is this?" "Coffee. Earth's second greatest contribution to civilization." Yusuf smiled. "Try it." Varek drank the coffee. He did it the same way he had eaten the chili, carefully, deliberately, giving it his complete attention. His expression cycled through several distinct phases. Confusion first, then something sharp and alert as the caffeine hit his biology in ways it had clearly never been hit before. Then a long, slow stillness that Yusuf recognized from years of negotiation tables. The stillness of someone recalibrating. "This is," Varek began. "Stopped. Started again. This compound. It affects cognition." "It does," Yusuf agreed. "Most humans can't begin functioning in the morning without it. We've been drinking it for roughly 5 centuries. We built entire economies around it, went to war over trade routes for it." He paused. "We named coffee shops after our children." Varek stared into the cup. "You are telling me your species is chemically dependent on a beverage?" "Enthusiastically and unapologetically, yes." "And you offered this to a Dominion warlord." "I offered it to someone who finished an entire bowl of ghost pepper chili alone without flinching," Yusuf said. "That earns the good coffee." Something happened then that Yusuf would later struggle to describe accurately in his report to the Security Council. Varek, Supreme Warlord of the Iron Fang, conqueror of 11 worlds, commander of the largest fleet in the known quadrant, made a sound. Low and brief and completely involuntary. Not a laugh exactly. Something older than a laugh. The sound of something ancient and battle-worn encountering genuine surprise and not quite managing to contain it. He set the cup down. Ambassador Al-Rashid, I have received tribute from 11 civilizations. His copper eyes fixed on Yusuf with unsettling directness. Gold, crystal, weapons technology, enslaved populations, planetary resource transfers. A pause. In 30 years of conquest, no envoy has ever sat across this table and made me feel that I was the one being studied. Yusuf said nothing. Let the silence work. You're not afraid, Varek said. It wasn't an accusation. It was genuine puzzlement. I'm terrified, Yusuf said pleasantly. I just come from a planet where we learned to cook with things that could kill us and call it Tuesday. He refilled Varek's cup without asking. Fear is familiar. We don't let it make decisions for us. Varek watched him pour. What does Earth actually want from this meeting? Yusuf set the thermos down and looked at him directly. The same thing I want every time I sit across a table from someone powerful. A beat. A conversation between equals. The word landed in the chamber like a stone dropped into still water. Equals. Varek had not been called an equal by anyone in 30 years. He had been called supreme, feared, dominant, unconquerable, never equal. His jaw tightened. His eyes narrowed. Yusuf held his gaze without blinking and waited with the patience of a man who had spent 19 years perfecting a chili recipe. Then Varek did something that would be discussed in Dominion command circles for years afterward. He pushed his own chair back, stood, and walked to a sealed cabinet on the far wall. He entered a code, retrieved something, returned to the table. He set down a bottle of something deep amber, almost black, that caught the overhead light like liquid fire. This, he said, sitting back down, is from the fourth world we conquered. Fermented, aged 40 years, reserved for treaty signings and funerals. He looked at Yusuf steadily. I have opened it twice in 30 years. Yusuf looked at the bottle, then at Varek. Should I be worried which occasion this is? Varek almost smiled. That, he said, depends entirely on what you say next. Yusuf looked at the bottle for a long moment. Then he reached into the diplomatic case beside his chair and produced a single folded sheet of paper. He unfolded it slowly and placed it flat on the table between them. Varek looked down. It was a recipe. Not chili this time. Something simpler, shorter. 12 ingredients, clear instructions, no warnings. At the top, written in Yusuf's careful handwriting, were 2 words. For sharing. Varek read it in silence. Then read it again. Bread, he said. The oldest thing humans make together, Yusuf said. Every civilization on Earth independently invented it. Doesn't matter the culture, the continent, the century. Humans always eventually made bread and then handed it to the person beside them. He smoothed the paper gently. We fought over spices. We went to war over coffee routes. We hoarded gold and burned cities. He looked up. But bread we always shared. The chamber was absolutely silent. Varek poured 2 glasses of the amber liquid, pushed one across without ceremony, lifted his own. Yusuf lifted his. They drank. It hit differently than the coffee. Slower, warmer, something that had spent 40 years becoming exactly what it was, complex and smooth, and carrying the ghost of whatever world it came from, preserved in every drop. Yusuf set his glass down carefully. That, he said with complete sincerity, is extraordinary. 40 years, Varek said quietly. The world that produced it no longer exists. A beat of silence fell between them that neither man rushed to fill. I'm sorry, Yusuf said. He meant it simply without politics, and it landed that way. Varek studied him for a long moment. Your planet, he said finally, it is genuinely a death world. Our surveys confirmed every classification. The atmosphere, the fauna, the biological compounds in your food alone. He turned his glass slowly in his massive hands. By every metric we use, Earth should have produced a species defined entirely by survival. Brutal, closed, territorial. He looked at Yusuf. Instead, it produced you. Yusuf smiled tiredly. It produced both. We're complicated. Yes, Varek said. You are. He folded the bread recipe with surprising care and set it aside. Then he opened a drawer and produced a datapad, sliding it across the table. New terms. No iridium. No weapons transfer. No tribute of conventional kind. Yusuf looked at the pad without touching it. Earth will establish a culinary embassy aboard this flagship, Varek continued. Full diplomatic immunity. Monthly exchange of cultural materials beginning with food. Agricultural and botanical data shared reciprocally. He paused. And that chili recipe is to be considered classified Dominion intelligence. I will not have every warlord in the quadrant discovering what I discovered last night without proper context. Yusuf looked up from the pad. You want to protect other warlords from being emotionally affected by Earth chili. I want to control the rollout, Varek said with complete dignity. Yusuf picked up the datapad, read every line, set it back down, extended his hand across the table the way humans have across every table, every century, every impossible room they were never supposed to survive. Varek looked at the hand, then took it. One condition, Yusuf said. Name it. Next time, you bring the bread. I'll bring the chili. A pause. And we do this properly. For the first time since the transmission that had stopped Earth cold on a Tuesday morning, Supreme Warlord Varek of the Iron Fang smiled with something that had nothing to do with conquest. Agreed, Ambassador. Outside the viewport, 11 fleets held position around a small blue planet that had answered an ultimatum with a recipe and somehow, impossibly won. Not with weapons, not with gold. With 19 years of patience, 2 pages of careful instruction, and the oldest argument humanity had ever made to a dangerous universe. We made something worth sharing. Come to the table.